What's up, guys? The Western Conference Finals are a repeat of last year. So the 2024 Western Conference Final is the same two teams as this year. So the Edmonton Oilers and Dallas Stars are a rematch with with a lot of familiar faces, but some new faces, especially on Dallas's end. So the Edmonton Oilers, what is there to say about them? Well, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, arguably the two best players in the league, are still chasing their first Stanley Cup. Can they get it done this year? Well, they beat the Dallas Stars last year, but with new acquisitions of Mikko Rantanen and Mikael Granlund, that might put a halt to their Stanley Cup dreams. So, Luca, what are your thoughts essentially on these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, they're two completely different teams, just based on the way they're built. Dallas is a juggernaut. Like top, all four lines are fantastic. All, uh, you know, all great. Like all forwards are really good. They're all four lines are really good. Sorry, I don't know why they have Alex Petrovic listed on the third line right wing, but anyway,
He's had
uh,
it pretty well so far.
yeah, but he's a defenseman. I don't know why they put him there. Anyways, doesn't matter. Their decor is really good too, and so they've shown that they're capable of competing against some of the best teams in the league. They beat Colorado, they beat Winnipeg, and obviously now they're taking on the Edmonton Oilers. But even in net, Jake Oettinger has been pretty good. So I think for Dallas, they're a team that's really complete. They're a team that has a lot of skill, a lot of talent. Like I mentioned before, four lines that can score, that can produce at a high level. But not only that. Um, their decor has been really solid. And, they have Miro Heiskanen back. Thomas Harley's been a big revelation for them. Esa Lindell's played really well. Liam Bichelle has really come into his own in these playoffs, which I think has been really impressive. And then obviously, with the situation of Jake Oettinger being, pretty solid in these series as well. Dallas has the complete package, right? They're built a little bit like Florida, just in terms of, offense, defense, and goaltending. And I think that they have the recipe to be able to win this series. However, they are coming up against the Edmonton Oilers. And last year, the Oilers bested them in a 7-game series and arguably ended up going to the Stanley Cup Final to take on the Florida Panthers. But, why does Edmonton become so good? Well, this year, they've actually got depth. It's not – their top guys are still their top guys, McDavid and Draisaitl, but they're getting more production from, other parts of their lineup. We talk about Kasperi Kapanen, who scored the winning goal to eliminate the Vegas Golden Knights. He was a big, has had a decent series. Connor Brown, Evander Kane, two guys that have continued to play well. They're still getting production from guys like Nugent Hopkins and Zach Hyman, albeit not the same sort of production. They're still getting production. And even guys like Corey Perry, Janmark, and Frederick have been really good. So, that's impressive for Edmonton, being able to find, the depth that they currently have on defense as well. Darnell Nurse and Bouchard. I thought Bouchard had a better series against Vegas than he did in round one against LA. I think the other thing too that we'll give credit to is their goaltending. Calvin Pickard gets hurt in game 3. Skinner comes in and back-to-back shutouts. And you know what? That's like very, very impressive for him and for the bounce back after, what he had against LA. There was concern about whether Stuart Skinner was going to be able to find this game again. And, back-to-back shutouts, he looks good. And, it's not like Calvin Pickard didn't play well when he was in net. He did play well. And I don't necessarily think that he was an issue. Obviously, he gets
6-0.
Right. He was 6-0. He came in, he looked really good. And then obviously he gets hurt. And Skinner came in and did the job for the Oilers, at least in the last 2 games. So, Edmonton's on a high right now. They beat LA. They came through a hard-fought series against Vegas and played really, really well. And now they're coming up against Dallas, and this is their toughest test. And I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for Edmonton this year than it was, let's say, last year, but also during the last 2 series. And the reason I say that is, Dallas is just like, look at their team. Look how good they are. But, it's hard to bet against Connor McDavid. And I think the other thing too is, if you look at Draisaitl and you look at McDavid, they want to be able to avenge what happened last year. They want to be able to go in and win that cup. I think they believe they can do it. And, look, if Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard can continue to play at the level that they've played at least recently, it's definitely, that possibility is definitely there. It's just very concerning because, not concerning, but it's still a question mark because you don't know what Stuart Skinner you're going to get. And, if it's evidenced by the series against LA, well, you're seeing that Stuart Skinner is hit or miss. He's either really good or really bad. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to be able to judge this series based on that because like Skinner could suck and then you're going in with Pickard, but at the end of the day, it's like you still don't know. Like Edmonton goaltending is still a question mark. Even if Stuart Skinner's had 2 shutouts back to back and he's played well during those 2 games, he's still a hit or miss goaltender. So you still don't know what you're going to get. Even though he helped Edmonton win against Vegas, there's a lot of concern there about is he going to be able to continue that against Dallas and against
Yeah.
Florida, although he has the familiarity of being able to play against Dallas last year. The one thing I'll add, and I'll pass the mic over to Chris, Mikko Rantanen has been the difference maker for Dallas in these playoffs. Hands down, the best player, has been the best player in these playoffs, has continually proven why that trade or that Colorado made to get rid of him was a mistake. And he's showing that, this guy's a playoff performer and that he's carrying the team on his back right now. And that's, I think, a big question mark for Edmonton is last year when they played Dallas, they didn't have Rantanen, right? They had all these guys, but they didn't have Rantanen. And Rantanen's a big addition to this team. So I'm curious to see how this goes. But to me, Dallas looks like I don't know how anyone beats Dallas. Genuinely, I don't know how anyone beats Dallas because of Rantanen.
Well, let's not forget Mikael Granlund, who also got a hat trick.
Yeah.
Mikael Rantanen got 2 back-to-back.
Flash.
Yeah, they got 2 back-to-back hat tricks. Mikael Rantanen. So in Game 7 of the first series versus Colorado, and then the first game versus Winnipeg, he gets a hat trick, and then you have Granlund that gets a hat trick as well versus Winnipeg. But let's not deny the fact that Dallas Stars did get shut out 2 times by the Winnipeg Jets. So the 2 times that Winnipeg did win, they conceded 0 goals. And, you could say it's because you have Connor Hellebuck playing much better in the second round of the series. You could also say because Winnipeg has very solid defensemen. There could be a lot of things that contribute to those 2 results.
Right.
But can Stuart Skinner come into the series and get at least 2 wins in the first 3 games? That's the question. Can he continue to be hot like he has been the last 2 games of the series versus Vegas? Because in my opinion, I think he's able to do that. And I think as inconsistent he's been, last year Stuart Skinner probably played his best hockey in the playoffs. Apart from maybe the finals, I would say was not the best. And Edmonton still found a way to come back and force a Game 7. So we'll see what happens in terms of the goaltending, but they arguably have the worst goaltending right now in the Final Four.
They definitely have the most inconsistent. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
that too. So you look at Dallas, and I remember making this video last year when we spoke about them, and I said it like Dallas has no flaws to their game. This is before Mikko Rantanen and Granlund. I'm like, this team is dangerous. They're a very, very good team, and they still found a way to lose in 6 games. And Edmonton shocked everybody. And we said the same thing. Their goaltending is going to be an issue. Jake Oettinger is better. They don't have the depth like Dallas does.
Yeah.
And we could copy paste that and say the same thing here. But at the end of the day, they did win in 6 games. But here's the thing now. Mikko Rantanen and Mikael Granlund, 2 trade deadline acquisitions. Well, actually, Granlund was acquired a little bit before that, but have been fantastic. Cody Ceci has been pretty good considering how much he gets shot on. He's done a pretty good job on the back end.
Yeah.
Thomas Harley, ever since Miro Heiskanen broke his leg, that has changed his game completely.
Correct.
He's got some more minutes, more responsibilities on the power play. He killed it as a call-up for Team Canada at the 4 Nations. He's been fantastic, and they haven't taken him off the first power play. And this is a guy that's always excelled in the power play. And I don't know why they had Miro Heiskanen on the power play for majority of the season before he got injured, when Thomas Harley was always better offensively. Miro Heiskanen is a very good 2-way defenseman, but he's better defensively than he is offensively, right? So there's some questionable things, but I'm happy that they're able to make these adjustments when it mattered most. Sam Steele had a very good series versus Winnipeg. One of the most surprising names for Dallas. Dandanov, you know, so giving some depth as well. Mason Marchment, a lot of complaining on his end in versus Winnipeg,
Yeah,
but for calls that were missed according to him. But this is a very deep team. But if I would have to say who needs to be better, well, just looking at the stats, it's kind of obvious who we have to say. And there's two guys in particular. Jason Robertson. I know he's only played 6 games. He's definitely not 100%. He was literally
right.
wearing a knee brace after the last game of the season where he got injured, missed the whole first round.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, he's gonna have to be better, and hopefully, with the days that he's been given off, he's able to come back stronger, but he needs to be better. And I know they have Ranton, they have all these guys, but in a series versus Edmonton, especially where you lost 6 games, especially where the argument was made that, well, you have depth, so you could rely on your depth. Well, Edmonton beat you last year, so he's gonna have to be on top of his game because arguably, apart from Rantanen, he's their best player on this team. You have Jamie Benn. If he could just get out of the penalty box and stop being on for goals and play the way that he had during the regular season, he could be a very good player as well. But I don't know what it is when it comes to playoffs. Jamie Benn is just awful. I don't know why. It's baffling in my opinion. He's the captain of the team, so I'm expecting a lot more from him. But everybody else has been carrying their own weight. Wyatt Johnson is fantastic. Such a young player to be able to go this far into the playoffs 2 consecutive seasons in a row is fantastic. Um, it's funny how Rantanen, the two teams he's played for, Carolina and Dallas, are both in the conference finals, the East and in the West. And Stankoven, something I forgot to mention in the last video, but he was in the Eastern Conference Final now, and he was in the Western Conference Final last year. And I
yeah,
think he's the youngest player to ever be in both conference finals.
yeah.
So that's pretty impressive. So Carolina and Dallas are the winners of this Rantanen trade,
Right.
and Colorado are the biggest losers, like we've said in
Totally.
in our previous matchup video. But
Yeah,
going back to the Edmonton Oilers now, getting Evander Kane for these playoffs was a huge, huge um factor for them. He's been fantastic. 7 points in 10 games. Um, Also Corey Perry showing that he's a good playoff performer. Every time he makes the playoffs, he goes to the Stanley Cup Finals. Has he won the Stanley Cup? No, he hasn't, unfortunately. But Corey Perry is always finding a way to be an X factor in these playoffs, whether he's playing for Dallas, Tampa, Montreal, or Edmonton. He always finds a way to go deep into the playoffs. Connor Brown, people were crapping on him during the regular season last year, became a playoff beast. Same thing this year. Not a great regular season, but when it matters most, he's a beast in the playoffs. Vasily Podkolzin, a guy that was counted out by many, especially in Vancouver, goes to Edmonton, had his ups and downs, but being such a factor in these playoffs for Edmonton has been great. Victor Arvidsson, he's only played 9 games, but when he's played those 9 games, he's contributed. Adam Henrique, a guy that they got at last year's deadline, was good for them in the playoffs. They kept him around. He's playing well too. They're getting contribution from everybody. And in 2 games, Kapanen scores the winning goal in overtime versus the Vegas Golden Knights. So this is, Edmonton is a pretty deep team. I know they don't have flashy names outside of their top 6, but just like the Carolina Hurricanes, they're finding a way to win hockey games, and they beat Vegas and they beat LA. And ever since they were down 2-0 versus LA, they've been very, very dominant. They've been in control of every single game. And I know they're like, oh well, there was 2 games that went in overtime versus Vegas, but like if you watch that Vegas game where they won in overtime, um, they were fantastic. They dominated. They were peppering Aiden Hill, which led to a fantastic connection between Leon Draisaitl and McDavid for that winning goal. And Kapanen scoring in overtime to eliminate Vegas. Like, who would have thought? They could have easily won in 4 games, easily, had Stuart Skinner not come out of his net, and there was a bad defensive play from Edmonton's decor where Leon Draisaitl had to go all the way back and stick out his stick and unfortunately hit his tape and went in the net, like with 0.4 seconds left in the third period. But Edmonton came back. They tied it 3-3. They were heading into overtime. They were this close to go to overtime, and it was anyone's game. They could have won. And unfortunately, that was not the case. But to win in 5 games versus Vegas is very impressive. Skinner getting back-to-back shutouts. Who would have thought? That's the whole topic of the Edmonton Oilers this playoff run. Who would have thought? Who would have thought they would have beat a stronger LA team that was up 2-0? Who would have thought they would have taken the Vegas Golden Knights out in 5 games? Who would have thought that Picard would have been 6-0 before he got injured? Who would have thought that Skinner would have had 2 back-to-back shutouts to eliminate Vegas? When they needed it most, he stood up and he took charge. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm gonna say the same thing. Like I said after the LA series, you can't count out the Edmonton Oilers. You
No,
can't.
no, I don't. You can't. And also the other thing too about the Oilers that I think ultimately makes things interesting a little bit is, it's like we said before, right? Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are definitely going to want to avenge what happened last year. But the other thing too is Edmonton hasn't played bad hockey, so it's not a question of like the Oilers being able to come in and like not be able to compete. They beat Dallas last year. The only difference is that obviously Dallas has Rantanen this year compared to last year, but they know how to beat Dallas. They've done it, and I think for Dallas, if you look at the series against Winnipeg, they weren't really at their best. They were good, but they weren't like wow, right? Like you said, they got shut out twice, and both times that they got shut out, Hellebuck played really, really well. And I think that that's a big thing is that for Dallas, they're going to have to find ways to make sure that A, they don't run into a hot Stuart Skinner, but B, are they going to be able to elevate their game in round number 3 to be able to beat the Oilers? And the reason I say that is, you look at everything that's gone on, right? And you look at how well they've played over the last, stretch of games. Edmonton looks a lot better than Dallas right now, just in terms of the way they've played. And so I think that that's a big confidence booster for Edmonton and being able to come into this series. But they're going to need more. And like you said, Tyler Seguin is going to need to be better. Jamie Benn's going to need to be better. You look at a guy like Jason Robertson, he's going to need to be better for Dallas in order for Dallas to be able to beat Edmonton. Whereas Edmonton, they're kind of getting production everywhere. Jake Wallman's been a really good acquisition for them at the deadline. He looks fantastic. They're also potentially supposed to get Ekholm back from injury in round number 3.
He's a full participant as of today.
Right. So at some point in this series, he should come back. That's going to be a big boost to Edmonton's blue line. And so that's a big thing too, right? Is the Oilers not being able to have arguably one of the best defensemen on the roster for at least the first 2 rounds of the series is huge for the Oilers to be able to go into that. So, you know what? Like, the series is a lot closer than I think people are going to give it credit to. It's going to come down to Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, realistically. And that's, I think, ultimately what it's going to decide is, is Stuart Skinner going to be able to continue the production that he's had towards the last 2 games? He's not going to get a shutout every game, obviously, right? But if he can continue where he left off against Vegas and he can continue to produce and elevate his game and put himself in a position to where he can, have games where he's not letting in 6 goals or have games where he's letting in 0 and have a game where he lets in, let's say, 1 or 2 and they win, that's going to be huge for Edmonton. So, we'll see. I think for me personally, it's hard for me to bet against Edmonton in the sense that McDavid and Draisaitl. I want Edmonton to win, and I'm going to make that clear right now. They're the only Canadian team left, with Toronto obviously shitting the bed. Not that I was cheering for Toronto anyway, but I did say that they were going to win in 7. So I will be cheering for Edmonton, but I will say I find it hard to believe that they're going to beat Dallas 2 years in a row. That's my opinion. And I just think that like Mikko Rantanen seems to be on a mission. And I think for Dallas, they need to win a cup, right? We've been talking about them talking about them being cup contenders for years to come and about how, they're going to get it done. But since the COVID bubble, they haven't really made it back to the Stanley Cup Final. Last time they did, they lost to Tampa. they're kind of in the same boat as Carolina, where like they go to the conference final and they don't really get it over the hump.
Yeah.
They need to get over the hump. Edmonton had their final last year; they didn't get it done. Obviously, Edmonton's looking to go back there, and same thing with Florida, right on the eastern side of things. But it could also be a situation where maybe we have a different matchup, and it's Dallas versus Carolina. So I don't know, but I think Dallas needs to prove that they can do it, and I think for Edmonton, they also need to prove that, like, look, we believe that we're deserving of a cup, and so they're going to go out there and I think do it. But I'm going to go out and say Edmonton beat Dallas last year in 6. I'll go out and say Dallas beats Edmonton in 6 this year.
Okay.
But I'm cheering for the Oilers.
Look, everyone questioned why they got Jake Oettinger and why they didn't get more, I guess, depth offensively, and especially why they didn't get a goalie. But who would have thought that Jake Oettinger would have been the perfect replacement for Ekholm? He is a plus 13. He's put aside his offensive numbers because, other guys can carry that weight, right? And he's taking Ekholm's role perfectly. He's done a fantastic job. And now you're adding Ekholm, who's potentially going to be in for maybe game 2 or game 3. He's not going to be ready for game 1. And your decor is pretty scary. John Klingberg contributing offensively is a good thing. He's never been really known for his defensive game, so that's great. Darnell Nurse playing some good hockey right now, offensively and defensively. Bouchard had a much better series versus Vegas than he did versus LA. They're surprising me. You can't doubt these guys. And I know it pains me to say this because Dallas is such a beautiful constructed team. There's no flaws. And I know even last year I said Dallas, there's no flaws. They can't get better than this. It's this year or nothing. And they found a way to impress me again by getting Rantanen and Granlund. But this is it for them. They have key guys like Ben, Seguin, and Granlund that are UFAs at the end of this year. They're most likely going to walk, in my opinion. So if this is their best team ever on paper, or at least since they've won the cup in '99, they're gonna have to go out and win this. This is their year. So
I believe so. I don't think their window's done because they signed Rantanen to 8 years, so they definitely.
no, they're just gonna have new faces. But this, like, having a good mix of young guys and old guys is fantastic. Even Matt Duchene's UFA, and he's their second best player in the regular season this year.
I just think I think they need more. I think they need to be a little bit better than what they've shown. And again, they played really well against Colorado, and I thought they were the better team. But I thought in the Winnipeg series, Winnipeg gave them a good run for their money. And obviously, Winnipeg's a good team. Like, you can't take anything away from them. But you saw the difference when Connor Hellebuck was at his best on how much damage Winnipeg could do, right? And so I think for Dallas, the good part is they're not facing Connor Hellebuck in round 3, which is a positive. But at the same time, they need to be better. And they need more from guys like Matt Duchene. They need more from guys like Mason Marchment. They need more from guys like you said, Jamie Benn. They also need more from Jason Robertson. But at the same time, they're getting production from their top guys in terms of Radulov, Rupe Hintz, Wyatt Johnston. So, it's a lot more of the depth that I think Dallas needs to get a little bit more from that they didn't get last series. Whereas with Edmonton, it seems to be a complete. Obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl are still McDavid and Draisaitl, but Evan Bouchard 12 points, Nugent Hopkins 9, Hyman 8, Perry 7, Kane 7, Brown 7, but Colson still has 6, right? Henrique with 4, Arvidsson, who he's been a guy that also could be a big factor for them. Kapanen only played 2 games, scored probably the biggest goal in his career.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. The World Juniors when it was his biggest goal of his career, but second biggest goal of his career, or at least one of. And then obviously, if you look at other parts of this team, like they've gotten production from everybody on their team that they've needed to get production from. And so I think that's what makes it interesting. And I think for me, there's a level of not concern, but I think there's a level of excitement that I have towards this series because I think it's 2 really, really good teams going at it. And if the goaltending can live up, I think we can have a really good, fun, 2-way series on both sides. But every time you watch Connor McDavid play hockey, it's fun. He makes
Yeah.
hockey enjoyable to watch on his own. Leon Draisaitl, same thing. And I like the series for both teams. I like the matchup. Faced each other last year. I think this time though, I just think Dallas has. I think that the addition of Rantanen is the reason I'm going to have to go with Dallas, just because of how good Rantanen becomes. But if Edmonton could shut him down, they can win the series easily.
So, we always say how important a third line is and a fourth line is in the playoffs. Well, looking at these third lines out of the four teams that are left, like we honestly glaze the crap out of Florida's third line and Luosterainen, Lundell, and Marchand. But Evander Kane, Henrique, and Connor Brown has been a solid line since the beginning of these series. And if you look at Dallas on paper, you have Jason Robertson and Wyatt Johnson on your third line. Like, that's crazy how much depth they have. But the thing is that Jason Robertson hasn't been playing well because he's not 100%, and Wyatt Johnson, he's a minus 13. And I know, like, we could say he's so good offensively, but he's been arguably their worst forward in terms of goals against, right?
Yeah,
And, they're going to have to clean up their game defensively. Like, just comparing both of Edmonton and Dallas's rosters, they're in a way better spot, Edmonton, defensively. And who would have thought? You look at them at Edmonton, you think, oh, okay, they're not good defensively, whatever. But they've really cleaned up their game after coming back 2-0 versus LA. And the only
yeah.
guy that's in the negatives is Jeff Skinner, and he hasn't played since game one.
No, that's it.
Everyone else is in the pluses. And if you look at Dallas, there's many guys in the negatives.
The only thing I'll add though, and this is kind of interesting, Dallas has the third. Well, they have the best power play of the teams remaining,
Yeah,
and they also have the best PK from the teams remaining, which bodes well for them. But it also means one thing: they don't really they score 5 on 5, but they've scored a lot of goals in the power play.
yeah,
And for them, I think that's also why there's a lot of guys that are minuses, is because they get a lot of production on their power play as well. You look at the power play goals, like Rupe Hintz has 3, Randall has 2, Rantanen has 2, Wyatt Johnson has 2. Just that alone, is 9 power play goals. They've scored in total 12 power play goals in the playoffs. So like that to me, I think is impressive on its own. Whereas with the Oilers, they've scored a lot of goals, and they've been on the power play a lot, but they've scored a lot 5 on 5 as well. And if you look at the
exactly.
power play goals, right, like it's not even your typical McDavid and Draisaitl. Draisaitl has 1 power play goal. Nugent Hopkins has 1 power play goal. Evan Bouchard has 2. Corey Perry has 2. Total, that's only 6 power play goals, right? So compared to Dallas's 12, it means that Dallas has relied a lot more on their power play than Edmonton has. And I think that actually bodes well for the Oilers, because what that means is that Edmonton's been really good 5 on 5, whereas Dallas has been good on their special teams, but not the best 5 on 5. And that's where I think this series could make a difference. And you talked about Jeremy Benn. Well, if Dallas ends up, taking penalties and being in the box, we know how good Edmonton's power play is. So that's not a concern, but it's about making sure that, even Edmonton, they can play 5 on 5. They don't have to worry about, taking penalties and being on the power play. They can do it 5 on 5. So I think that's what it's going to be. I think just ultimately, though, at the end of the day, like it's hard for me to pick underdogs, even if it's Edmonton. Like I want Edmonton to go back, and I just don't think they could beat Dallas. I don't think with how good Dallas is, I just don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, they definitely showed flaws versus Winnipeg.
Right.
I think they were more dominant versus Colorado.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, when you have guys scoring hat tricks, like it's nothing. That obviously helps you.
For
But
sure.
this is gonna be a very close series, and um, there's a couple more points I'll make. Adding Frederick, sorry, he's been a good sandpaper guy, and I think like just looking at the Edmonton Oilers, they have like a lot of sandpaper guys, a lot of big bodies. They're not contributing like as much as you would hope for them to do,
Right.
but like they're getting some key goals. You have Kapanen, right? He's over 6 feet. Trent Frederick, solid guy as well, hard nosed player, and you need these types of players to succeed in the playoffs. Evander
Absolutely.
Kane is a big guy too. Corey Perry, um, these guys play hard, and they're and I think these guys, when acquired, they weren't really necessarily acquired for the regular season. I think they were thinking more long term. They were thinking postseason. They were thinking playoffs.
Right.
And a guy like Matthias Janmark, what did he really do, you know, in the regular season? Then you look at his playoff performance last year, you're looking at how he's doing right now. He's doing great. He's doing exactly what you need from a bottom six forward, right? And
Right.
I just think that, so here's my prediction. If Dallas is able to score 5 on 5 and they don't heavily rely on their power play, they'll win in 6 games. If the Edmonton Oilers get Ekholm back by game 2 or 3, and Stuart Skinner does not shit the bed and is able to win 2 out of 3 games, I think Edmonton wins in 7 games. Um, if Stuart Skinner does shit the bed and Picard comes in and he plays great, I think they could win in 7 games. But they need to come into the series with, we're not getting Picard back this series. He's not ready. Stuart Skinner is our guy, and he's gonna have to own it the same way he has the last 2 games versus Vegas. Ekholm, he's an option. He's going to be there. He will be in the series, which is fantastic. And I think that's another thing is that they've been playing for Ekholm. They knew he was not going to be the first two series versus LA and Vegas, but they knew he was an option for the third round, which he is now, and he's practicing. He's almost ready to go. So now they're like, okay, we've done our job. Now let's continue. Let's get him back. Let's try to go to the finals with him now.
Yeah.
So I think under those circumstances, that's how it's gonna play out. It's gonna be a very tight series, but like I said, they're gonna have to get more contribution from their other players. Dallas could easily have two first power plays if they want to. On any other team in the league, that second power play would be a first power play. It's just crazy how much depth they have. But then again, we've seen a lot of teams have fantastic players on their roster. Hint, hint, Toronto, right? And it
That's not
hasn't
going around.
translated, and it hasn't translated into success. But for
Yeah.
Dallas, so far so good. Let's see how they're gonna fare in this matchup versus Edmonton. Looking at Edmonton and Carolina, they don't look like they have the scariest lineups in terms of their whole forward core and their D core, but they do have some fantastic key pieces to get them to a Stanley
I
Cup
agree.
final.
I
So
agree.
we'll see what happens. But guys, thank you so much for watching our Eastern and Western Conference videos. If you like our predictions, make sure to write down the comment section below. If you don't, also write down the comment section below. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Um, who wins this series, Dallas or Edmonton? How many games will it take? Who will be the X factors? Can they win without Picard potentially not playing in this round? How many games until they get Ekholm back? We'd like to hear all your thoughts in the comment section below. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which will be the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching.